Hello, encouragers. I'm Rebecca Scott, wife, mother of 4, author, and owner and designer of Rebecca Scott Designs. I'm here to encourage you, to make you feel the I can do this spirit each and every day of our awesome journeys to fulfill those many important roles. I believe we are fully equipped to execute, and I will provide you with as much knowledge and practices and systems as I can to help you understand just what I know you can do. Execute. We got this. Encouragers, welcome to the podcast today. I have got a guest that we have had on before. And in our little pre-interview chat, we were laughing about not knowing how many years ago it was that we got to record together. But here's what I do remember. I remember pretty sure it was a newborn at the stage. And we're recording on Zoom, everybody, so you can't see, but she's in the background here. So if you hear a couple of little sounds, she is busy playing. And I remember I was so... I try not to use the word overwhelmed, but that's probably the appropriate term here. But I was desperate to record this podcast with our guest Merritt here. So I thought, I'm just going to make this work. I'm going to keep this schedule no matter what. And so I ended up having to lock myself in different rooms while we were in the middle of the interview. I was like going to the laundry room because I thought, well, they won't come in here. Like I can just get 10 more minutes of this interview in here. And then I had to lock myself outside for a little bit, like hoping that the phone connection would still work while I continued to do this podcast.
I had no idea. That's hilarious.
I so clearly remember. Yes, it's so fun. Like what we will do as mothers to just make sure your dreams come true. I think that's part of that grit thing that I'm sure we'll cover some of that as well. So this is my guest, Merritt Onsa, and she is from Colorado. Welcome, Merritt.
Thank you so much. It's fun to be back.
Yes. So you have a podcast called The Devoted Dreamers. And I love that in our first interview, we talked, it was an old, I guess I would call it old now, but it was this platform that you could use called Periscope. And what I really remember about it, how bold you were in your faith that you were reading scripture aloud on there. Mm-hmm. And if I remember right, you would read it like super early in the morning too, right?
Oh yeah. Because I had a small child and I would get up at 5:30 in the morning because it's really like the only time that I knew I had this little window. And I would jump on Periscope, which is kind of like, I don't know, Instagram Live now, just a live video tool. And I would open up my Bible and just read the next set of verses of whatever, after whatever I had read the day before. And I did it 6 days a week for about almost a year. So yeah. And just whoever showed up, it was like whoever kind of comes into the room, we would talk about the scripture. And it was fascinating. It was a good little experiment.
I remember that part. I remember trying to do the interview as a mother with a young one is trying to sneak between rooms. So I appreciate you coming on the podcast again today. And today we're going to talk about something that may not be familiar to the listeners, but it should be if you've been consuming a lot of podcasting books, especially in the year that we just got through. And the name of it it's called Imposter Syndrome. So, Merritt, tell us a little bit about what you think the imposter syndrome is.
So you do hear this term a lot. And actually, as I went to look it up, it's like a psychological term that a therapist would probably use in their dealings with a client. But as it was coming up for me, and as I was talking to my own podcast guests, I was hearing people talk about the fear of failure and talk about this fear of not being enough, or using this phrase of, who am I to do this? I have this big dream that I feel like God's given me, but I feel so small in comparison to it. Who am I to do this? Why would God choose me? And then I really went and looked it up in the dictionary. Like, what is this that people are talking about? What is imposter syndrome? And the Oxford Dictionary says it is the persistent inability to believe that one's success is deserved. And so there's a little bit of, you have some skills and abilities and you have a desire to do something, and yet you believe that you just couldn't possibly do that or make this happen or take the next step that feels kind of scary. And so online, we talk about that as being imposter syndrome, that we feel like we're a fraud or a fake because maybe we see somebody else doing the thing that we want to do or doing something similar. And we think, oh, well, they have it all figured out. I don't. So I'm just going to sit by the sidelines and watch them succeed and never take that step for me to be able to do it. And I'm sure a lot of your listeners relate to that. Like anybody with a big hope and a dream has to hit that roadblock at some point. Otherwise, it's probably not very big.
And how much of it do you think is personal, like personal experiences from just growing up, like not believing, or how much do you think of it is spiritual warfare as well?
I think it's all of that. As I've dug into this more and really looked at what scripture says about our identity and about who God is and about how he creates us with purpose and gives us gifts that are ours intentionally. And he gives different gifts to different people. The more you look and read into that, and then you think about John 10:10, like the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy. Like, wouldn't he absolutely want to steal, kill, and destroy any gift that God would give us? Any passion or purpose? The enemy's like, nope, I'm going to take that away from you if you'll let me. And that was when I kind of started getting a little bit angry. Like, I encounter all these women with beautiful dreams that are intended to serve others. They're not, it's not, I want to get famous or I want to be a, what's the word? Like, I want to be an influencer. No, it's women that are like, I want to start a nonprofit. I want to, recently I've had a couple women who have come out of domestic abuse situations. They're like, I want to help other women find ways to gain employment so that they don't feel they have to stay in an abusive relationship. It's like, oh, this is huge. And yet the enemy's like, I will keep you down as much as I possibly can so that doesn't ever happen, so that freedom for others doesn't ever happen. And so, yeah, it makes me kind of mad how much spiritual warfare there is in this when we start to let our hearts engage with our passions.
And even if your dream is not necessarily nonprofit,
sure,
even if it is owning a boutique, but the serving part of it is correct. Like, you're still serving with allowing women to have confidence in the clothes that they're buying, or making in your home so you can be home with your children. Like, the dreams, whatever it is, if it starts to become a passion and a love and something that lights you up, Satan will immediately start trying to get his fist within it and trying to change it.
For sure. Especially what you just said about having the freedom to work and be home with your children. I mean, especially this last year, it's like I know my kids so differently now when they're not going to school or going to daycare, going to play dates even, I know them so much more. And isn't that probably more how God designed the family to be, is that we would know our kids and be with our kids. And so the opportunity to do something that lights you up and not sacrifice your family, oh my gosh. And of course, Satan would want to get in there and try to steal that from us and say, oh no, you can't possibly do this. You're not whatever. You're not enough. You're not good enough. You don't know enough. You don't have the education or the business experience, whatever it is. So I feel like it's a real battle, and probably the first step to tackling that is to acknowledge that you're in the battle and that the attack is there and that it's real.
So tell us a little bit, you have formed a whole digital course that is about 6 weeks long, and it's a group program on the imposter syndrome. So tell us a little bit about that and what our listeners could learn through it.
Yeah. So I really feel like, in addition to acknowledging that imposter syndrome is something you're struggling with, or even if you don't call it that, if you have some of those thoughts and feelings like I'm not enough or I fear doing this big thing, it really, the way we begin to tackle it is understanding and knowing who God is in the big story of our lives, and then understanding and knowing who we are, where our identity rests. Acknowledging that voice, acknowledging that it is the enemy. And then I love to take women through stories from the Bible of transformation that happened to people when they chose something different than their ordinary route of operating. So instead of believing the voice, you're right, I'm not enough, I can't do it, I'm going to shut my door and go take a nap. Instead of believing that voice, standing up and making a different choice, renewing your mind with scripture. I walk my ladies through like 5 declarations that we can remind ourselves every day that are based in scripture so that we can be equipped to fight that battle when it comes at us. Because I think even when people begin to tackle imposter syndrome, it's just like any other kind of mindset challenge. Like in a moment of weakness, it will come back. Or when you least expect it, it will come back. And you've got to have tools in your tool belt to begin to battle those voices so that it doesn't keep your dream or your business or your work down. It allows you to flourish in what God's created you to do and the purpose He's given you.
Oh, it's beautiful. I have so many thoughts as you're going through it. And just, I love that you use the word declaration because it's like such a powerful statement. I talk frequently about affirmations, but darn, declarations, that's like a whole new step up, I think.
Yeah, that actually came from one of my students.
Oh, it did? Okay.
Yeah, I was
Can you give us an example? Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. It actually came from one of my students because I was like, these are thoughts, meditations, affirmation. What are they? And she was like, these are declarations. My favorite one is no weapon formed against me will prosper. And that is straight from scripture. No weapon formed against me will prosper. And if we believe that that's the power that God has given us, that He is sovereign over all things, including this stinky voice in our brains, like no weapon formed against me will prosper. So all I have to do is believe who God says He is and believe who He says I am and remind myself daily that no weapon formed against me will prosper. The enemy has already lost this war. Like he's not going to win. And so that I feel like that's the one that like comes to mind most often for me because I need that reminder that the enemy might be trying to take me out, but none of his weapons formed against me are going to ultimately prosper.
Oh my gosh, that's a great, powerful example. What is one of the others? Can you pick out one of the others you say during your course and with your women from the Bible? An example of where she was doing the everyday. I picture Mary and Martha. I picture Mother Mary. Like, what is an example from there where they were on the ordinary path and God said, "Nope, I'm calling you to something bigger"?
Well, it's so simple. You remember the story about the woman with the, I think it's like 8 or 12 years of bleeding, so she's, so Jesus is on the road and he's surrounded by this crowd. So she's unclean. If she's been bleeding and nonstop for however many years this is, and if you can imagine like, whatever, having your period for a decade, like, and then in that society, she's not really allowed to be among other people because she's deemed unclean. And yet she heard Jesus was in town. And so she came into the crowd kind of secretly thinking like, oh, if I could just touch his cloak, I would be healed. And so she does what's totally against societal, culture and belief that she should even be in that crowd. She reaches her hand out to grab him and he immediately feels the power go from him into her. And he knows exactly what's happened. And she made this bold step knowing that Jesus was the healer, believing that even if she was somewhere she wasn't supposed to be, that he was going to take care of her. And I just feel like it's such this like subtle story that you might kind of miss it or not really dig into it very deeply. But the faith that it took her to take that step, to reach out to him and say, I desperately need you. There is nothing in me that is going to repair what's been broken for years. Will you please heal me? And he does, and it's instant. And it's beautiful when you like really dig into the details of that story. And, it's not, it's a secret wound that she has because there is probably nobody in her life. Like she's isolated, alone, suffering, and her life is immediately changed because of her faith. That's really beautiful.
I immediately went to like, there's going to be merchandise around that. Like I touched the cloak. like a t-shirt that says I touched the cloak. It's like the faith of I touched the cloak. Like I made the decision. I decided this was not the way I wanted to go, and all my fears and whatever, at least I'm going to touch this cloak because I really believe. That is such a powerful story. And something that we so need to hear moving into 2021 is there is a lot of unknown yet, which, I feel about saying the unknown encourages, that you can make a lot of decisions with God as the leader, and you can still move forward with things. But there's some things that are out of our control, which is going to happen in a year like we just had. But even just that story is like, well, I'm going to choose to grab the cloak, and I'm going to choose to step forward, and I'm going to choose to say, Satan, that today. That is just such a good frame up for 2021 and how we're going to approach it.
Absolutely. Yes.
So good. I'm going to make the t-shirt myself, everybody. What else is on the horizon for you, Merritt, with the Devoted Dreamers podcast and some of your courses?
Yeah, so the podcast is continuing, and every week I'm talking to women about their God-shaped dreams, and I'm starting to put some more of my voice out there with some solo episodes every month. And then my imposter syndrome course has been through beta testing. I've had one set of students go through it, and then I'm hoping sometime later in the spring to open it up again. So that's running on a wait list right now. But if people are interested, I have a link that I can share that y'all can get on the wait list and get informed when the course is available again.
That's awesome. Well, we need to enlist ourselves in that just to help. Again, like from scripture, just build up more of our shields and sharpen our swords and everything just to be prepared for what's going to come at us.
For sure.
Awesome. Merritt, is there anything you would like to share with our listeners to encourage them moving into 2021?
I think probably the one thing that, and I probably already said it, but I'll just reemphasize it, is that if you feel like God has given you something to do with your life beyond motherhood or being a wife or just being a woman or contributing to your community or church or whatever it is, I think you can grab hold of that. Like for anyone out there who hasn't yet said yes to the purposes that, you kind of sense within you and that God's calling you to, that I really believe that it's biblical, that there is something that he has built into you that is completely unique to you, that he's not given anyone the exact same gifts with the exact same personality, with the exact same life experiences as you. And so if you look out into the world and you think, somebody's already doing this thing that I dream of, I say go for it. That you are uniquely gifted and purposed by the King, by the God of our universe. And so no weapon formed against you will prosper. And we need your gifts. We need what he's given you, because as the Bible talks about, we are all part of one body, each having its own parts and its own purpose. That if you decided not to use the purpose and the gifts that he's given you, the rest of us are going to miss out. And so please don't let us miss out on what he's given you. It is so important. And I just love watching women flourish when they realize the depth of God's love for them in looking at like, oh, he actually wants me to do this. Like it brings him joy that I would use the gifts that he's given me. And it's so fun to see that lived out in his women.
Oh my gosh, that's perfect. That's perfect. Thank you so much, Merritt, for coming on the podcast today. No weapon formed against us. And at last, I would say, I would just encourage everybody in 2021 to grab the cloak.
Absolutely.
Until next time, encouragers, we got this.
I know how you can start executing on all the things that God has equipped you to do. You can pick up my book at theencouragerpodcast.com and check out the store complete with book, journal, and the master course. Also, make sure to check out the resources tab where you'll get a hold of all the PDFs from the podcast. Thank you for tuning in, encouragers. Remember to subscribe so it's automatically on your phone. And please rate and review me. We got this, encouragers.